figure out what is critical information infrastructure was perhaps the first challenge that we had. So we did a fair amount of brainstorming ourselves and came up with what is known as interdependability matrix. What we did is that we put what we thought were the critical information infrastructure on one side and try to figure out how each of these entities are going to interact with the other entity and how much of interdependence is there between each of these entities, so that we know that, okay, fine, if A has got interaction with all the entities from B to Z, then obviously A is the most critical information infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So finally, we drew out a list, and let me sort of offer this caveat that this list is by no means exhaustive or comprehensive. It's a dynamic list because all of us are aware of what the risks in cybersecurity are. So this list as of now has got 6 categories: power, energy, oil and natural gas, etc. forms the most critical entity as far as the CI is concerned, because every other critical entity or critical information infrastructure is dependent on power as the mother resource for its usage, for its operations. Then we have a toss-up between telecom and banking and finance, because banking lately, because of all the demonetization that has happened and all the cash moving into the digital domain, there has been a huge amount of transactions that are happening in the digital domain, which wasn't there possibly till about November. So today, if I look at it, I find that banking and financial services, or banking especially, because that's where most of the action is happening, is right up there as far as the critical information infrastructure is concerned. That's where all the attacks are going to come from, or that's where all the attacks are happening. And all of you would have read about what happened about 2-3 months back regarding debit card compromises and stuff like that. And it's more of it is happening. In fact, 2 days back we had the Vault 7 leak coming out, which talked about how systems have been compromised. Of course, that is more in the telecom or the communications segment. So that is the third. The third element is the communication of the telecom segment, where today we are also dependent on telecommunication for our existence or for our survival. That if you have those systems not functional, you find that you're not able to work, or you're not able to lead a life or lead a normal life. So telecom is the third sector. The fourth sector is, of course, transport. When I say transport, I'm talking about the landline systems, which means the transport that happens on roads, road transport, the shipping, marine transport, and of course the air transport. So air transport has the ATCs, which are all completely networked and automated these days. Even the online booking systems, they are so intertwined. When we look at it, we realize that today, if I want to book a ticket, the first thing I do is I go to cleartrip.com or makemytrip.com. Now, if the MakeMyTrip or the ClearTrip doesn't have a backend connectivity with, let's say, SpiceJet or Swiss Air or any other airline that I want to fly, your booking experience itself starts getting affected. So these are the points at which these vulnerabilities creep in. The touch points that you connect up your intranet to the internet, or the different intranets gets connected to each other. These are the issues, the major issue areas. So transport is the fourth segment. The fifth is, of course, the government. Government today is a power user of communications and compute infrastructure. State governments, central governments, ministries, departments, directorates, etc. They all are working in a computerized manner, and with Digital India push coming up, a lot of e-governance platforms have come up, and e-governance itself has got its own framework for cybersecurity. So managing all that is part of the CIA's responsibility. And so I think that, that brings me have I covered everything? I think, that's about it. Now, there are certain sectors which we are looking at pretty actively. The last one which I didn't talk about is the strategic public sector enterprises. So all those who don't get covered under the government department or the power or telecom or other things which are strategically important, for example, the BHEL, the Bharat Electronics Limited, the ECIL, these are agencies which are all strategically very important for the country's safety, security, economic security, etc. So that is a sixth element. Another thing which we have started looking now, which still doesn't figure in the list of 6, is the health sector, because that's another vital sector where there are a lot of issues with respect to cybersecurity. People have started moving around with pacemakers and dispensers and stuff like that, which are all monitored using this IoT and all these technologies that have come in. So how do we really have a framework or best practices for using this equipment, monitoring this equipment and regulating this equipment. So that's another sector that we started recently looking at, although we are not put into that list of 6. So how do we go about doing it now, or how do we help out the entities? There are various methodologies that we are following. Number one is we create this awareness exercises. As I said, the first challenge was for an entity to figure out what is CII. So we went about explaining to them how to quantify and qualify what you have as IT asset into a CII bracket. That was one of the exercises that we carried out. And the idea is that even if you are a CII, unless you notify it as a protected system, under the Government of India notification, Gazette notification again, there are no legal avenues you have to sort of penalize an offender. So somebody with a malicious intent tries to compromise your system or try to get into your network and create some kind of a issue there. Unless you are protected, unless you are named as a protected system, the IT Act, the penalties of the IT Act don't kick in unless you are a protected system. So this is a lacuna that we've been trying to address at a policy level with the Ministry of Law, Ministry of IT. So these are all happening parallelly. But if you are a protected system, then you have the mandate of the Government of India to prosecute, lodge an FIR, take it to the cybercrime cell, and then start putting into motion the legalities that kick in along with that. So that is one of the exercises that we'll be doing. We are also helping out these entities to, once they have identified the CII, how to take it to a protected system status. We are helping out the entities do that. We are also helping out entities who want, let's say, a vulnerability analysis of their CII or their networks or their critical information infrastructure to be carried out. We are helping them do that. We help out the entities by doing something known as cyber security preparedness surveys, which means you help them come up to a stage where they can have a benchmark of security set up in their networks and in their communication domains. We also have introduced something known as a responsible vulnerability disclosure program, RVDP we call that. So the idea is that, let's say there is a specific sector, the banking sector, and one of the banks comes up and tells you that there has been a breach or there has been a compromise, and this is what we have discovered in the network. And can you help us do a little bit more analysis of that, or figure out what it is all about? So when we look at that and we realize that it's a sector-specific malware, let's say it's a banking Trojan, then we can anonymize that information, pass it on to the other entities in the banking sector, so that they can beef up their securities and bring up their levels, bring up their security to a level that at least they don't get affected. So a lot of this threat intelligence information sharing has now started happening. We also have the normal conventional ways of communicating to our entities using WhatsApp. We have separate groups for all the 6 entities, WhatsApp groups, where in real time we push out messages, alerts, vulnerability alerts, some malicious IP addresses. If we are observing them, we carry out analysis and push it out to them. We also have almost 250 CISOs of these CIIs now registered with NCIIPC. So we push out again vulnerability alerts and threat analysis, threat intelligence information sharing, etc., etc. So fundamentally, that's how we are progressing now. In the last 3 years, as I said, about 250 odd entities are now part of the NCIIPC family, and we reach out to them, they reach out to us. So there is a fair amount of sharing of information and collaboration that is happening as part of our job. And as I said initially, the list is, it will keep on increasing, it will be dynamic. So more and more sectors will keep on adding in, and that's how we plan to do that. So that's briefly about what NCIIPC is all about. I thought that should set the tone for the presentations that follow. I will now request Floria to move with the proceedings.
Yeah. Thank you, Commodore Anand, for setting the stage. Since the audience is limited, if anybody has questions, it would be good to have an interactive discussion. Any questions for Commodore Anand at this moment? Okay.
May I?
Please.
I was pretty happy with the list you narrated for the properties which need to be protected. Under the PSU category, was it specific from your side to mention only BEL and ECIL? Because I feel entities like NHPC, NTPC are much more vulnerable for the country as a whole. Yeah. Anything happening there would simply compromise the power security of the country, and we would be in a total blackout and probably nothing will work.
Right. I think, yeah, so I should apologize for not including all those agencies as well. They're all part of the list, by the way. Some of them, for example, NTPC, let's say, or the Hydel Power Corporation that you mentioned, they would also fit into the energy and power segment as well. And power, as I said, is the most critical of the sectors. So they automatically go into another list. So all those who are not part of that list is what comes into this list. And I, possibly my background also is the reason that I talked about ECL and BEL, because I come from a defense background and BEL is a defense public sector unit. So maybe, those interactions with BEL would have been far larger than that. So that is top of my mind. So my apologies. It is not that it's a small list. There is an exhaustive list out there as well. And all of them who don't figure in any of those 5, but are considered strategic for the countries. Look, NCIIPC's narrative, if you look at it from the Gazette notification, it says that any computer resource whose incapacitation or destruction would lead to national security issues, financial or economic security issues, physical health and safety. These are the 4 broad overarching terminologies that we have been asked to protect. Entities who take care of these 4 broad charters. So anything that comes under this obviously falls into our domain. So I think that answers your question. Incidentally, we have Mr. Ajoy Rajani who has joined us out here. So no issues. If you can just briefly introduce yourself with your background so that everybody else get to know.